You woke up this morning, and before your feet touched the floor, your mind was already somewhere else, already thinking about what needs to be done, already measuring the day against some invisible clock that never stops ticking. And maybe you didn't even notice it happening. Maybe it's been so long since you moved at your own pace that you've forgotten what that even feels like. There's a strange tyranny in the world right now, a pressure that tells you that speed equals value, that if you're not keeping up, you're falling behind. That rest is indulgence and slowness is failure. And so you move faster. You pack more into each hour. You scroll and switch and rush from one thing to the next, hoping that somewhere in all that motion, you'll find what you're looking for. But here's the truth that no one wants to say out loud. Most of what you're chasing doesn't need to be chased at all. And the faster you move, the further you drift from the life you actually want to live. This isn't about laziness. It's not about giving up or opting out. It's about recognizing that there's a kind of power in slowness that our culture has forgotten, a strength in moving deliberately, in refusing to be swept along by the current of everyone else's urgency. Because when you slow down, really slow down, you begin to see things as they are, not as they seem when you're rushing past them, not as they appear in the blur of constant motion, but as they actually are. In Japan, there's an old concept called ma. It doesn't translate perfectly into English, but it points to something essential. Ma is the space between things, the pause between notes in music, the silence between words, the emptiness that gives shape to what surrounds it. It's not absence, it's presence. And in a culture that worships fullness, that celebrates constant activity and endless productivity, Ma reminds us that the empty spaces matter just as much as what fills them, maybe more. When you move too fast, you lose Ma. You lose the space between one moment and the next. Everything blurs together into a single stream of obligation and distraction. You stop experiencing your life as a series of distinct moments and start experiencing it as a vague sensation of being overwhelmed, of always being slightly behind, of never quite catching up to yourself. And in that state, you become reactive. You stop choosing your path and start simply responding to whatever demands your attention most loudly. But there's another way. It requires something that feels almost revolutionary in our current moment. It requires you to move more slowly than you think you should, to do less than you believe is necessary, to create space where everyone else is cramming things in. And when you first try this, it will feel wrong. Your nervous system will protest. Your mind will generate urgent thoughts about all the things you should be doing instead. But if you can stay with it, if you can resist the pullback towards speed and busyness, something shifts. You begin to notice things you've been moving too fast to see. The quality of light at different times of day, the actual expression on someone's face when they're talking to you, the way your body feels when you're not rushing it from one task to the next. These aren't small things. They're the texture of being alive. But they're invisible when you're moving too fast to perceive them. There's a common belief that moving slowly means accomplishing less, that if you're not in constant motion, nothing gets done. But this belief confuses activity with effectiveness. It mistakes busyness for progress. Because the truth is that most of what keeps us busy doesn't actually move us forward. It just keeps us occupied. It gives us the feeling of productivity without the reality of it. We answer emails that didn't need to be sent. We attend meetings that could have been avoided. We create work to fill the time we have, and then we complain about how much there is to do. When you slow down, you start to see which actions actually matter. You develop the capacity to distinguish between what's urgent and what's important, between what truly needs your attention and what's simply demanding it. And this clarity, this ability to see through the noise, is worth more than any amount of frantic activity. Because one deliberate action, taken at the right time for the right reason, will always accomplish more than a dozen reactive ones. The ancient Stoics understood this. They knew that the person who's always rushing is not in control of their own life. They're being controlled by circumstances, by other people's priorities, by the momentum of their own habits. Marcus Aurelius, even as Emperor of Rome with the weight of an entire civilization on his shoulders, wrote about the importance of stillness, of not being swept away by the appearance of urgency. of maintaining an inner calm regardless of outer chaos. This wasn't because he had less to do than we do. It was because he understood that the quality of his decisions, the clarity of his thinking, depended on his ability to remain centered even in the midst of demands and distractions. We've somehow convinced ourselves that we're different, that our circumstances are more demanding, that the speed of modern life requires us to be in constant motion. But this is a story we tell ourselves, not a truth we've discovered. Because every generation has felt this way. Every era has believed itself to be uniquely busy, uniquely pressured, uniquely unable to slow down. And yet, in every era, some people have found a way to move at their own pace, to maintain their center, to refuse the demand for constant speed. What separates them isn't circumstance, it's choice. They've chosen to value presence over productivity. They've chosen to prioritize depth over breadth. They've chosen to move slowly enough to actually experience their lives rather than simply get through them. And this choice, more than any technique or strategy, is what changes everything. When you walk, really walk, without your phone or your headphones or your racing thoughts about what comes next, you remember something fundamental. You remember that your body has its own pace, its own rhythm. And that rhythm is almost always slower than the speed at which you've been trying to move. Your breath wants to be deep and even. Your stride wants to be measured and relaxed. Your attention wants to rest on what's in front of you rather than jumping ahead to what's coming next. But you've been overriding these natural rhythms for so long that they've become unfamiliar. There's a reason why every contemplative tradition, whether it's Zen Buddhism or Christian monasticism or Sufi practice, emphasizes slowness. Why meditation asks you to sit still. Why prayer asks you to be quiet. Why walking meditation asks you to move at a pace that feels almost absurdly slow. It's not because these traditions are trying to make you less effective in the world. It's because they understand that speed is a form of avoidance. That when you're always rushing forward, you're usually running from something. Maybe from discomfort, maybe from difficult feelings, maybe from the reality of your life as it actually is, rather than as you wish it to be. Slowness forces you to be with what is. You can't outrun your experience when you're moving deliberately. You can't distract yourself from difficult emotions when you're sitting still. You can't avoid the truth of your situation when you're paying attention. And yes, this can be uncomfortable. It can bring up things you've been avoiding. But it also brings you back to yourself. It returns you to your own life, which is the only place where anything real can happen. Consider how you eat. Most meals are consumed in a state of partial attention. You're reading or watching something or thinking about what comes next. The food goes in, but you barely taste it. You finish and you're not sure if you're satisfied because you weren't really present for the experience. But when you slow down, when you actually pay attention to what you're eating, the whole thing changes. You taste more. You enjoy it more. You need less because you're actually getting the experience rather than just the calories. This isn't about food, it's about everything. When you're present for your life, you need less stimulation, less novelty, less stuff, because you're actually receiving what's already here. The same applies to your conversations. When you're rushing, you're not really listening. You're waiting for your turn to talk. You're thinking about what you'll say next. You're checking to see if there's something more interesting happening on your phone. But the person in front of you, they're offering you something real. A moment of actual human connection, and you're missing it because you're moving too fast to receive it. When you slow down enough to actually listen, to actually be present with another person, the quality of the exchange transforms. You understand more. You connect more deeply. You remember the conversation afterward because you were actually there for it. This is what we've lost in our acceleration. Not just time, not just calm, but the ability to actually experience our lives. We're skimming across the surface of our days, touching down briefly on 1,000 different things, but landing fully on none of them. And then we wonder why we feel empty, why we feel like something's missing, why we can't remember what we did last week, even though we were busy every moment of it. The antidote isn't complicated, it's just hard, because it requires you to go against the grain of everything around you. It requires you to say no to things that everyone else thinks are important. It requires you to defend your time and your attention against a world that wants to consume both. It requires you to move slowly in a fast world and to be okay with how that looks to other people. Start with something small. Pick one activity that you usually rush through and don't rush through it anymore. Maybe it's your morning coffee. Maybe it's your walk from the car to your front door. Maybe it's brushing your teeth. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that you practice moving at a human pace. At your pace, not the pace that efficiency demands or that productivity culture insists upon. Your actual pace, which is almost certainly slower than you think it should be. And when you do this, notice what happens. Notice the resistance that comes up. Notice the voice that tells you you're wasting time. Notice the urge to speed up, to get on with it, to move to the next thing. Don't fight these impulses, just notice them. Because in noticing them, you begin to see how deeply the programming runs, how much of your sense of self-worth is tied to being busy, how much anxiety lives in the space between tasks, how uncomfortable it is to just be, without doing anything in particular. This discomfort is important information. It's showing you where you've abandoned yourself in favor of productivity, where you've traded presence for performance, where you've let speed replace substance, and once you see it, you can begin to make different choices. Not all at once, not in some dramatic transformation, but gradually, moment by moment, choosing slowness over speed, choosing depth over breadth, choosing to be here fully rather than racing ahead to some imagined future that never quite arrives. The old masters of tea ceremony in Japan would spend years learning to move with perfect deliberation. Every gesture precise, every motion intentional. Not because the tea itself required such care, but because they understood that how you do anything is how you do everything. That practicing slowness and attention in one small ritual trains you to bring that same quality to the rest of your life. You don't need a tea ceremony, but you do need some place in your life where slowness is allowed, where rushing is not required, where you can remember what it feels like to move at a pace that doesn't exhaust you. Because here's what no one tells you about constant speed. It's not sustainable. The nervous system can only maintain high arousal for so long before it begins to break down. The mind can only process so much input before it starts to shut down. The body can only handle so much stress before it starts to fail. And when these systems break, they don't break cleanly. They break in ways that force you to slow down, whether you want to or not. Illness, burnout, depression, injury. The body has its own wisdom, and if you won't choose to slow down, it will eventually make the choice for you. So you can do it voluntarily now, while you still have some agency in the matter. You can choose to build slowness into your life as a practice, rather than being forced into it as a breakdown. You can learn to move with intention rather than compulsion, with presence rather than anxiety, with a sense of your own pace rather than in reaction to everyone else's urgency. This doesn't mean you become passive. It doesn't mean you stop caring about what you're doing or stop working toward your goals. It means you stop believing that speed is a virtue in itself. That busy means important, that if you're not constantly in motion, you're not valuable. These are lies that serve a particular economic system, but they don't serve you. They don't serve your health, your relationships, your actual life as you're living it day by day. The power of moving slowly isn't about rejecting the world. It's about engaging with it more fully. It's about being here for your life instead of racing through it. It's about discovering that when you stop trying to be everywhere at once, you can actually be somewhere, really be there, fully present, fully alive. And that presence, that quality of attention, is what transforms ordinary moments into something worth remembering. What turns a simple walk into a meditation? What makes a conversation with a friend feel like coming home? You don't need to change everything at once. You don't need to quit your job or move to the countryside or renounce modern life. You just need to find small pockets of slowness in your day. Small moments where you refuse the demand for speed, where you move at your own pace instead of the pace the world insists upon. And gradually, these moments accumulate. They begin to change how you experience everything else. They remind you that you have a choice, that you're not trapped in the current, that you can step out of the stream of urgency anytime you decide to. So perhaps start now, not later, Not when things calm down, not when you have more time, because that moment never comes. There's always another thing to do, always another reason to rush. The only time you can slow down is now. This moment, this breath, this single step, and then the next one. Not faster, not slower than you can actually move. Just at your own pace, which is the only pace that's real, the only pace that's yours. The world will continue to move quickly. That's not going to change, but you don't have to move at its speed. You can be the stillness at the center of the motion, the calm in the middle of the chaos. Not because you've checked out or given up, but because you've chosen to live at a human pace. To move as slowly as you need to move in order to actually be present for your life. And in that choice, in that simple act of refusal to be rushed, you'll find a power that all the speed in the world can never give you. The power to be here, to be yourself, to move through your days with intention and presence instead of compulsion and distraction. That's not a small thing. That might be the most important thing there is.